Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the introduction, Chris. As Chris said, my name is Ean Seeb. I'm here from Denver, Colorado. Denver Relief Consulting are the names of the first two businesses that I helped found. Denver Relief is the longest continuously running center in Denver. We think it's the second longest continuously running in all of Colorado. Been around for around 7 years. I'll speak a little bit about Denver Relief Consulting as well. And as Chris said, one of the founding members of NCIA, and I'm the former past chairman, served 2 terms as the chair and one as the vice chair. It looks like the bottom of my slides are cut off a little bit, so if there's anything pertinent at the very bottom, I'll let you know. Before we get started, if it's possible, this is an awfully large room, and I was wondering if people didn't mind if they would get a little bit closer or scoot over to the center sections. I'm not your parents, so I'm not going to make you, but it would certainly make it easier for the purpose of the presentation. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about Colorado and what it was like being one of the first states to regulate and legalize cannabis on both a medical and recreational level. So we're going to start at the very beginning, which is we passed a ballot initiative. It was called Amendment 20. This was in 2000, so we're talking 16 years ago. And this was something that allowed, very similar to California, and 1 year later, patients to possess, caregivers to grow, and that was it. It was just a patient access caregiver model. We had no way to capture tax revenue, or there wasn't a reason to capture tax revenue. There was no ability to start a business. And at the same time, there was no consumer safety. There was no rules. The limited patient access is that every patient was allowed to grow and possess 6 plants, half of which may be flowering at any given time. And it allowed this legal defense for the black market for those who were cultivating and who became caregivers for more than one person. So there were a very few storefronts in the very beginning. They were very low level, no advertising. It was only word of mouth business. And at the same time, in a few years after this began, in 2005, in Denver alone, there was a voter initiative. And it was another ballot initiative. It went before the voters to legalize the use of cannabis, or to possess cannabis for adults over the age of 21. It passed, and the next year, more people were arrested for cannabis than the previous year. And it was still a problem. And so the next year, in 2006, we had City Council pass an ordinance that it became the lowest priority for law enforcement. So in theory, if somebody was jaywalking and somebody else was smoking a joint, the police should be going after the jaywalker. So how did Denver Relief start? Well, prior to us starting as a delivery service, I knew of a doctor in Denver and knew that he was compassionate, had a conversation with him. I got my medical cannabis license as a result of a pretty bad ski injury that I had in the late 90s. And when I met this doctor, I realized that not very many people knew that there were doctors that were compassionate and available in Colorado. And so I started a small word-of-mouth business where I help people meet with the doctor, submitted their documents for them, and at the same time became their caregiver. And so it enabled me to possess more cannabis that I could legally sell to cannabis patients or provide to them. So that's how I met my business partner, Kayvon Kaladbari, helped him get his license. He then introduced me to a gentleman who said, I have the best strain of cannabis you've ever smoked. It's called biodiesel. You may have heard of it. Now it's a well-known name. It comes from Denver Relief. So the 3 of us got together after I helped both of them get their licenses. We each threw in $2,000. Kayvon and I each threw in $2,000 cash. Our former partner threw in $2,000 worth of cannabis. And we started Denver Relief as a delivery service. Bought a phone, a cell phone, stole a phone number from the Russian mafia, which is a true story, but totally separate story for another day, and put an ad in the back of our Village Voice media, Westward, said Denver Relief, ... we deliver, bought some business cards on Vistaprint, put some magnets on the side of our cars, and that's really how Denver Relief began, as a delivery service, only providing medical cannabis to patients of any age at that time. So delivery service for the first 6 months. We very quickly realized that we wanted to get a store and do this the right way. There were no rules that neither permitted nor prohibited storefronts from operating. There were no rules. So we went to the very heart of Denver. Our address is 1 Broadway, 0-100 block, both north-south and east-west. So we like to say it's the center of cannabis regulation, at least in Colorado. So it's a visible place. It's tucked into the back of a courtyard. We have no off-street or on-street signage. We have one A-frame that's popped up that is cruising down Broadway. And that retail center began in 2010. So we started operations in May of 2009. We opened up the retail store in the first couple of weeks in 2010. And the way that we were able to cultivate was, again, through for every patient we had, we could grow 6 more plants or possess 2 more ounces. So Kayvon, Adam, and I combined forces. We were cultivating in a home in Colorado, and that's how we started. There were no special licenses available. When we went to the city and said we wanted to be a medical marijuana dispensary, they said, "Oh, no, you can't put that on your city license. Are you crazy?" And so we put that we were herbal providers. And that was how we began. We did register as a business from day one. We did get a retail sales tax license from day one. We did collect taxes from day one. Even when we were a delivery service, we were paying taxes. We wanted to be as transparent and open and honest as possible and not have any problems when it came to the fact that we were still violating federal law. So while that was going on, what was happening in the rest of Colorado? In September of 2009, a few months after we opened, but before we had our retail facility, there was the infamous Ogden memo that came out. And the Ogden memo said, quite bluntly, that those in unambiguous compliance with state law will not be a target of federal prosecution. So that was essentially, hey Rob, that was essentially opening up the floodgates. So hundreds of people started opening up cannabis dispensaries. We were a few months ahead of everybody, but about 800 opened up very shortly thereafter. So how was it happening? Well, patients and caregivers were coming in and selling to dispensaries. There was a lot of home-based businesses. A lot of people were cultivating at home, walking in with a backpack, people coming in from all over the place. And as soon as we purchased it, it became legal medical cannabis. And that was it. So people were coming from Canada. People were coming from Mexico. There were reviews in the local Westward about how you could go to a dispensary and buy brickweed, as they called it, and showed, traditional, imported, not good, brown, just terrible cannabis. So it quickly became out of control. But there was nothing really that local law enforcement could do in local jurisdictions because we were, in fact, in unambiguous compliance with state law, which at the time was still very ambiguous. So we were begging for some type of regulation, or at least we thought we wanted to be begging for some type of regulation. So in 2010, January, coincidentally, the same month that we opened our retail store, there was legislation that was introduced to the General Assembly. And so, as very similar to what's going on here in California, there were 2 camps. There were those who wanted to have regulation, and there were those who wanted it to be just the way that it was, and the way that it's always been, and the way that it had been working for 10 years. But now we had a little bit of industry, and we had the ability to close the ranks and to start to lobby and to try and have a voice in the process to how we were going to create these regulations. So we started some local trade associations, very similar to what's going on here. And there was a lot of infighting. And right before we started these regulations, some of the trade associations started battling, and there was some bad press, and it created some problems for the industry. Nevertheless, we got through it. And in May of 2010, we passed the first code in Colorado that was regulating legal medical cannabis transactions, and that was called the Colorado Medical Marijuana Code. So how did that work? Well, that was in May of 2010, and we had 2 months, 60 days for operators to get everything in order to apply, and that happened on August 1st, 2010. So even though we had been operating for a year and a few months at that time, still didn't have applications and all these documents that we had to go through. So many people chose not to get involved, and they said, I'm not going through this regulation process where I'm giving up my rights and not giving up my rights, but giving law enforcement the ability to comb through records and just like any other regular business, right? So many people returned to the black market, but those like ourselves chose to go the legal route. So we went to fill out applications. We secured warehouses because no longer was it going to be permitted for somebody to cultivate cannabis in their home. They had to do so in a zoned appropriately, licensed appropriately, commercial space. And in addition to the state implementing their rules and regulations, we also had local jurisdictions. So in our case, it was Denver. So instead of just following state laws, I had to follow Denver's laws. And there were some pretty crazy differences with local jurisdictions and state regulations. For example, in Boulder, Colorado, you all may know it's a little bit of a bubble. They were requiring that cannabis cultivators had to use alternative resources for energy. So they had to buy wind credits. The state said nothing about it, but Boulder said, if you're going to be cultivating cannabis in Boulder, Colorado, you're going to have to pay extra for your power. So as it states here, we continue to be influential in kind of drafting these rules. Our revenue started to go up, the professionalism started to go up. People realized that you couldn't just be, as people refer to it, the old hippy-dippy kind of way of business. Like these were starting to be real businesses in Colorado. And, whoa, pardon me. So what happened as these rules got adapted? Well, naturally, some people fell out. Not everybody was able to play by the rules. It became very difficult to get up and running because a part of our regulations and our rules was that we had to be vertically integrated. So we had, in addition to being an operator, I now had to cultivate at least 70% of the cannabis that we sell in our facility. And so naturally, some people were good at retail, some people were good at cultivation, and they weren't necessarily combined. So what happened? We called them shotgun weddings in Colorado as the rules started to take shape, because people that were cultivators that didn't have a retail now had to select a business partner and do so in only 60 days. And so there was a lot of trials and tribulations with all of a sudden your business partners was somebody you barely know, and you had to do it to survive. It created some very difficult relationships in the beginning. At the same time, while this is going on, there was the beginning of community acceptance. The fact that these businesses were there, the fact that they went through the whole licensing process, the fact that they went through zoning, the fact that they were now registered with the state and local jurisdictions and paying taxes. And people's capital outlays started to pay off. In the very beginning, we didn't have these ridiculous application fees that we're seeing in some of these other states. We didn't have to post $2 million in bond and escrow money to show that cash was available to start our businesses. When we first started, these licenses were going for about $2,500. The largest cultivation license for over 600 plants was $18,000, which, when you think about it in comparison to what we're seeing in these other states, was really next to nothing. So these capital outlays for small businesses like mine that didn't require a lot of cash up front had the ability to continue and to grow the business. At the same time, we're still having banking, we're still having attorney's letters. We lost a couple of bank accounts at Denver Relief. U.S. attorney, it wasn't in Colorado, but it was here in California. Melinda Haag was making it more difficult for operators, and it was creating a little bit of vagueness for operators in Colorado with what was going on here in California. And multiple trade associations started. We had really small trade associations, the ones that serve small mom and pop stores. And then we had a little bit bigger businesses. And then we had these companies that really just wanted to dominate the scene in Colorado. And there were different trade associations for really each level. And then finally, as mentioned earlier, NCIA began. So while that's going on in Colorado, what's going on with us? Well, as we spoke about, shotgun weddings, ours formed very quickly in May of 2009. As I said, I helped my business partners get their licenses, and we just decided to start a business. So we realized that our fit wasn't exactly perfect, and we ended up making one partnership change, and the gentleman who was our lead cultivator ended up taking over for the gentleman who was our original cultivator and partner. And our cultivation stabilized. Instead of being in a house at 10,000 feet in Idaho Springs, 30 miles west of Denver, we were now in a cultivation facility in the heart of Denver in an industrial area. We started our green team, our community service team. Denver Relief has always believed from the beginning, the reason why we got involved in the industry was to make the world a better place for people. It wasn't just about the money. Thank you. It wasn't just about the money. It was about doing things for the greater good to make the world a better place than when we left. So we started the Green Team, community service team that has participated in, this is us at the 420 rally in downtown Denver, known as the largest 420 rally in the world. We have over 100,000 people come. We picked up trash there for hours and hours. We run a free bicycle and wheelchair repair clinic out in front of our courtyard. We collect canned food. We donate to Jewish Family Service Food Pantry, which is available to all. We work with a local community farm. We help them plant food. We help them harvest. They give away over 2,000 pounds of food every year to a couple different charities, as well as a restaurant that you just pay what you can. We started Denver Relief Consulting. People started asking us for our help. How did you get into this? So we decided that's a good way to go for business. So we started assisting people primarily with ancillary companies. The first thing we started was a company that's become one of the leading packaging suppliers in Colorado, MMC Depot, and also around the country. And we were forward thinking on A64. Many people were opposed to A64's Amendment 64, the campaign to regulate marijuana like alcohol, which you see on the right side. Many people were opposed to that in the beginning. And as I mentioned a couple times, we were founding members of NCIA. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's the National Cannabis Industry Association. It's the only national trade association that is dedicated to operators in the business, dealing with both direct-to-plant and ancillary providers. I strongly encourage you to check us out. There's over 950 members around the country, been very effective at getting these banking laws and tax laws introduced to Congress. Both 280E and banking have made their way the past couple of years through. So campaign to tax and regulate marijuana like alcohol, A64. That was introduced in 2012. It was on the 2012 ballot. And as I said, the industry was divided again. There were people that were scared. It didn't matter that we were already breaking the law federally by providing medical cannabis. Now people who were in the industry who, quite honestly, just wanted to protect their business, in my opinion, and keep it a little bit of a protectionist standpoint by keeping it solely medical, were worried about the feds coming in. While others, like myself, were excited about the opportunity to expand into the social use market. So November of 2012, the ballot initiative passed in Colorado. 55% more people voted for cannabis in Colorado than voted for President Barack Obama. And I say that not as a joke, but I say that, well, maybe a little bit as a joke, but also to let you know that it truly is a bipartisan issue. And when we see that there were more people than voted for just the Democratic Party voting to tax and regulate cannabis, I think that says something. So this is one of the big pictures. That's Betty Aldworth. She's now the executive director of Students for a Sensible Drug Policy. That's me with the terrible porn mustache to her right. As you can see, it's gone. So where are we now in Colorado? So Amendment 64 taxed and regulated the use of adult cannabis for all adults from anywhere in the world over the age of 21. So as long as you have a photo ID, you can now come to Colorado. You can now go into a recreational facility. and you can now purchase. So we have two different models, though. So I'm basically running two businesses now in our retail store. We have 5 registers set up. 3 of them are for our medical patients. 2 of them are for our medical patients. 3 of them are for our recreational customers. They're all in the same room, but we have separate inventory, medical on one side, recreational on the other. Vertical integration was required for 1 year in recreational, meaning that only those who had existing medical licenses were eligible to apply for recreational over the first year. And you still needed to, if you had to have a recreational cultivation facility to go along with your recreational store. That ended January 2015, which meant that for the first time under legal regulated businesses that people could have solely a cultivation facility or solely a retail. And so large-scale wholesalers started popping up. Another difference is that the purchase and the edible potency is different for medical. So medical, 2 ounces every day. It's at a time that you're allowed to possess. Recreational, if you're allowed to possess up to 1 ounce. If you're from in-state, you can purchase up to 1 ounce in one transaction, where if you're from out of state and you have an out-of-state ID, you're limited to only purchasing a quarter at a time, yet you can possess 1 ounce. So you can make 4 purchases over the period of a day or go in continuously. And under medical, we have to keep everybody's records. Under recreational, the state says that we're only required to collect as much information as you would in an alcohol transaction, which is simply verifying that somebody is over the age of 21. So where's Denver Relief today? We've built ancillary networks. We've expanded our consulting services. We're still very involved in the community. We're staying active in the regulatory process. We're on committees. My business partner is the co-chair of the Denver Environmental Health Sustainability Committee. I've been named to the governor, the upper right-hand corner, the governor's Marijuana Education Oversight Committee. Deals specifically with recreational cannabis. I would encourage you to check out Good to Know, the website where you can see these incredible marketing campaigns that the state has embarked on as a result of the tax monies that we collect, but some really, really positive messaging about things that you can do versus things that you can't do. Involved with Colorado State University and University of Denver and the University of Colorado, participating in different studies with them. We're still staying active in NCIA. We are involved at the local and state level very much. My business partner actually ran for city council last year. It was a failed bid, but still secured over 10,000 votes, which I thought was pretty impressive. And so this is just a mishmash of companies that we're affiliated with. Our first Las Vegas dispensary opens next Wednesday in downtown Vegas, Silver Sage Wellness. DRX is our concentrate line. Bios Lighting is a company that we brought to ArcView last year, and they're an LED lighting company. Mana Molecular Science, you're going to see them coming out with some new and novel products. Mass Roots, I'm on the board of directors of Mass Roots. It's the social app for the cannabis industry. If you don't have it, I would encourage you to check it out, especially in the face of what's going on with Facebook and Instagram deleting people's accounts. This is a place where you can go and share your cannabis experience. Stink Sack, you're going to see us on stage here in a little bit pitching, but we helped create the first child-resistant bag ever for the cannabis industry. We are partners with Cresco Labs. We've been very successful with our consulting company, and we've won licenses in Connecticut, Illinois. We won the first, second, and third highest cultivation score for our team, Cresco Labs. We won one of the 5 CBD licenses for our clients in Florida. We've applied in Maryland. We've applied in Hawaii. We had the highest cultivation score in Nevada. Helped a little bit more than 5 companies get licensed and operational. The thing that I'm most proud of that we've been recognized for is this past year, the Denver Post named Denver Relief's Green Team the most valuable as far as community involvement for the cannabis industry. And so when you think about giving back, and again, why we got into it, it was really special for us. So my name's Ian. There's the information. If you'd like to get a hold of us, And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was curious if there's been any studies looking at accidents, automobile accidents, and death.
And deaths?
And death regarding automobile accidents in the year that in fact recreation and medical marijuana.
Yep. It's a great question. So being on the Governor's Marijuana Education Oversight Committee, it's a long name. I have the opportunity to sit alongside members of CDOT, which is the Colorado Department of Transportation, members of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and we actually just last week reviewed some of these traffic surveys. And I'm not a statistician, nor am I a part of law enforcement, but the rates that they are seeing as far as cannabis, we're not seeing an increase in arrests related to cannabis. The thing that you have to think about in terms of that is looking at it in comparison to alcohol. We see that continue to rise, and it's been fairly stagnant. We have seen studies that I can comment on, and things that are always of concern are what about the kids, what about the kids? And the CDC came out with a study that showed that since cannabis was regulated in Colorado, teen use has actually gone down. I don't know about the level of accidents, but I know about the level of driving, and that well, I suppose that they're speaking specifically about accidents, that it has remained fairly the same while alcohol has gone up in Colorado. Yes, sir.
You referred to a cultivation score. What does that actually mean?
I'm sorry?
You referred to a cultivation score. What does that actually mean?
When we applied for permits?
Yeah, you had a cultivation score.
We had a cultivation store? Score. I'm sorry. Yes, with our applications. So in some of these states where they have merit-based applications, they do so by a point system, and they award licenses by the number of points that they have. And we received the highest score for cultivation in Nevada when they were assessing all the different applications. Pardon me, I thought you were referring to my application for Colorado for operation. I was like, I don't remember a score. Yes, that was in the state of Nevada, and also in Illinois, they did merit-based applications. Colorado's a little unique in that they didn't do merit-based applications, and so long as you met the requirements, so long as you had zoning, licensing, you're more than 1,000 feet away from a school, a daycare facility, another retail operator that wasn't grandfathered in, you automatically, and were of good moral and ethical qualities, you received a license. In most states now, the way that it's working is it's merit-based, and they have a limited number of licenses to award. So that's why they have a score system.
Question, may I ask just real quick?
Last question.
Okay, there's a tax in Colorado. It's 10% on the grow, 15% at retail, right? So it's 25%. If your patient goes from the medical counter to the retail counter, it's a 25% increase in price, right?
Yeah, the question was about taxes in Colorado. And the way that it works is for medical patients, they just pay traditional sales tax, which in the city and county of Denver comes out to a total of 7.72%. On the recreational side, and that's same for if you were to buy batteries, just no excise tax associated with it. For the recreational side, when a cultivation facility sells a pound of cannabis to a retail facility, there is an excise tax, 15% levied at that transfer. So I'm vertically integrated still. I have my cultivation facility. When I transfer my own cannabis from my cultivation facility to my retail facility, I have to pay a tax on that. It's based on 15% of what the state determines is the average price of a pound of cannabis, which they reevaluate every 3 months. We currently pay about $400 per pound just to bring it to our facility. From there is a retail sales tax. The customer is charged a 10% retail excise tax on top of it at the state level, and the city and county of Denver has added a 5% tax. So the total tax at the customer level that they're seeing on their receipt is 22.72%, but then there's that additional 15%, so they're paying, it's about a 38% total tax.
That's good. I mean, California's going to do the same thing. Is
It's, you know, the price, the difference in price between medical and recreational is getting slimmer and slimmer. We have collected over $40 million in taxes. In Colorado, when we wrote the bill for Amendment 64, it was to provide the first $40 million in taxes that we collected go to the Colorado Public School Capital Construction Fund. So we did donate through taxes, gave over $40 million to public schools. And in fact, there was so much tax revenue collected. I don't know if you're all familiar. There's a lot of stats that have probably been thrown at you today, but Colorado did $996 million in sales last year for legal cannabis. And so we ended up collecting way more taxes than we anticipated. And under Colorado law, we have something called the Tabor Bill that gives voters the opportunity to vote on whether or not they're going to return tax monies to the voters or keep it. And this past year, it was a good thing. The voters decided to keep the additional tax monies, and as opposed to returning them, it would have been like $9 a person. But we kept like $50 million in extra revenue that is going to go back into the state, provide more information about those programs that I spoke about, Good to Know, and the Colorado Public School Capital Construction Fund. I know we're out of time. I'll be standing over here for a couple minutes if you have any questions. Inquiry@denverreliefconsulting.com. I thank you very much for your time. I thank you for moving in. Have a good day.